What does this music make you think of? When you hear this and you let your mind drift and the theater of your imagination play out, you're likely going to be flooded with memories you forgot you even had. Everyone's unique experience will trigger something slightly different. For myself, it's memories of 11-year-old me at my next door neighbor's house playing all day and night before the only thing to stop us was the fact that we had school the next day. We would go to school, see our classmates, and talk about the experiences of the previous night on Modern Warfare 2. Stories of love, war, hatred, passion, friendship, adventure, and so on. Each story trying to one-up the other. This was our battleground. Amidst the dull and monotonous school days, we had our true calling waiting for us back at home. An unparalleled way to connect, compete, and experience things together. In these reviews I've been doing, I've tried my best to stay out of the realm of nostalgia as much as I can manage, with the goal of seeing something as objectively as possible. And while I'm still going to attempt that, this so far has been the hardest game to separate that from. But I think that's part of its story. Modern Warfare 2 was so much more than just a game. I think it's virtually impossible to talk about Modern Warfare 2 without also discussing the insurmountable impact it had on us as people, the industry of video games and media, and the world as a whole. I would go so far as to say Modern Warfare 2 is top 10 in some of the most influential pieces of modern media ever produced. But the real question to investigate is why. You might say Modern Warfare 2 is only looked fondly upon purely for nostalgic reasons, and that's a fair enough claim. But then I would ask, why do we have such nostalgia? Clearly that would indicate something spectacular was experienced during that time. We have that nostalgia for a reason, and it's not like everything we experienced during that time period stuck with us quite like MW2. And I'm going to make the argument that Modern Warfare 2's impact was well justified, and the game, more objectively speaking, has some unbelievably smart design choices that at the time were impossible to comprehend how good they actually were. As good as I think the game is, there are some imperfections which, believe me, we will get to. Modern Warfare 2's influence, however, reached far beyond itself and into our culture as a whole, and it was so much more than just a video game. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 released on November 10th, 2009, and while I was too young to purchase the game myself, my next door neighbor, who was also my best friend, his dad would always buy Call of Duty, and of course that would give us the opportunity to play. I was in middle school when I was playing this game. Life then, and the world more generally, were such different environments compared to our current day. Back then, it was still considered nerdy, and it was socially frowned upon if you played video games to any real degree. And I recognize that stigma went far back before I was even born as well, all the way back to the days of arcades and whatnot, but at least in my time on this earth, I've still seen gaming go from sort of an underground hobby, and a trait that was, at least for the most part, certainly looked down upon in most cases, to being literally a socially attractive trait to be good at games. And the reason that shift occurred, I give a lot of that credit to MW2. In fact, it's what helped me bond with a lot of my fellow classmates and make friends. I like sports and I played them in school, but I was never really any good at them. The only thing I was ever any good at was video games, and to be able to bond over MW2 meant new connections with people I probably didn't have much in common with otherwise. And for those of us who were on the younger side when this game came out, we knew because this was an M-rated 17+ game, we weren't really supposed to be playing it, and that made it even more exciting. For a lot of us, the most heated political debate was whether MW2 or Black Ops 1 was the superior game, whether the Xbox 360 or the PS3 was the better game console. Just before MW2 released, it's hard to imagine now, but the phrase Call of Duty was in no way a household name that it is today. MW2 is in a very large part responsible for putting Call of Duty on the map. With the days of COD 4 and World at War, while these games were extremely popular, all things considered, it was still comparatively a niche community compared to the massive juggernaut that the COD franchise is today. And as much as I'm looking forward to the Modern Warfare 2022 version, I can't help but feel that much of the excitement is tied to this, and not the game on its own merit necessarily. It might be great, and I hope it is, but to not correlate the two is almost impossible to do, and that can lead to, disappointment or confusion. MW2, when it released all those years ago, took some serious risks and chances to become what it was. Everything from gameplay choices, the addition of customizable kill streaks, death streaks, massively overpowered weapons, some very controversial moments within the single player, and even the collector's edition of the game in the night vision goggles were made so that the COD fanbase could more easily be weirdos.
We listened to a lot of feedback from our community on what they wanted from the collector's edition, and a lot of them, you know, they wanted to peep into people's windows. So we thought, how can we come up with a collector's edition that not only represented the game, but also represented our community's need to be perverts? So that's where the night vision goggles came about. It really met that need of being Modern Warfare-esque, but also very focused on perversion.
It's an important consideration.
Yeah, well, you know, we want to appease our fans.
I can't imagine something like that going up on the internet in 2022. It would be insane. Point is, MW2 was practically the definition of massive risk. At the time, Infinity Ward, headed by Vince Zampella, Jason West, and Robert Bowling, truly set out to make a bigger and better experience of the original Modern Warfare. It seems quaint now, but in a world full of remakes, soft reboots, sequels, remasters, recreations, and so on, MW2 was actually the first sequel game to ever appear in the Call of Duty franchise. Speaking of sequels, if you're enjoying these COD reviews so far and you want to see more, make sure to subscribe and stick around. Around 85% of you guys aren't currently subbed, and we are actually unbelievably close to 500,000, less than 10,000 to go, which is unreal, so thank you guys very much. Also, if you'd like, you can become a member, and members will be the first to play with me in multiplayer games of some of these older COD titles that are really hard to find lobbies nowadays, so if you want to take part in that, feel free to become a member. Otherwise, you absolutely don't have to. Otherwise, just sit back, relax, and keep enjoying the content. The goal was to take the successful formula of COD 4 and put it on steroids. In fact, that's probably the best way to describe it. MW2 is just COD 4 on the sauce. Everything is more exaggerated, it's bigger, the stakes are higher, and it's an adrenaline-fueled ride the entire way through. The music is even more impactful. Because COD 4 gave them some kind of real clout, they were able to get Hans Zimmer on this project, and regardless of how you feel about the actual game, almost nobody denies that the music in this game is genuinely something special. Hans Zimmer wanted something that challenged him and made him push beyond his limits with each project, and you can really feel the emotion in all his music. This purely heightened experience from the previous game is what satisfied current fans and brought in new fans to the Call of Duty series that would stick around for a long time. MW2, in my opinion, had the most effective marketing ever, and it wasn't because they had tons of capital to throw around on advertisements. And while there were ads for the game, the best marketing was done through word of mouth. People simply talking passionately about the game and sharing experiences with each other is what made this game grow like wildfire. And I would make the case that was made possible as MW2 was one of the most social-friendly gaming experiences at the time, only beaten possibly by Halo 3. The ability to interact with others in-game, host your own custom games, the classic 1v1s on Rust, terminal custom matches with friends, and so on, these were all integral parts of why we remember MW2 so much. It was optimized for social play and enjoyment. This was also responsible for spawning creators like Woody's Gamertag, Wings of Redemption, and so many more COD commentators that really found their footing with this game, and that style was just beginning to get popular on YouTube. This was at a time when competitive gaming was just starting to be taken somewhat seriously.
You heard it from us right here on xdaoproject.com and Raw Gameplay 402, and we Xing out, baby.
With COD LAN events being possible and even more ways for people to connect over a game than ever before. MW2 would launch with a single-player story campaign following directly after the events of COD 4, and a multiplayer mode obviously, and a co-op mode called Spec Ops that was brand new at the time. Each of these pillars brought something special, so it's time we break them down one by one and find out what made them great, starting with the campaign. Modern Warfare 2's campaign is something truly unique among the series. This single-player mode, like the rest of the game, had a reach far beyond just itself. The campaign took so many risks that it even ended up quite often in mainstream media. This was at a time when MW2 and video games, more generally speaking, were being scapegoated for tragedies in real life. This made video games, and specifically MW2, public enemy number one for the mainstream audience who didn't have a deep understanding of video games. Obviously though, players of the game could see what was trying to convey more clear-headedly. They just wanted to tell a risky yet compelling story that they were proud of. At the time, if you played Call of Duty, it was almost a rebellious thing, in a small way as well. which gave it that little something extra for our angsty teen spirits. In all honesty, for a lot of us, I think some of our rebellious teenage years were manifested in playing games like MW2 and others, and I'm glad it turned out that way, because it probably kept a lot of us out of rebelling in other more dangerous or destructive ways. This was a healthy way to rebel at the time, and I'm not even sure how many of us realized that's why we wanted to play so much. In any case, this was a healthy outlet for a lot of us growing up. The campaign in MW2 was meant to be a direct sequel to the previous events in COD 4, which again was a first ever for Call of Duty. In MW2, they went with a similar approach to structure and storytelling, as far as it being a linear storyline. Compared to what we're used to now, you don't have the added depth of multiple endings, enhanced immersion through player choice affecting outcomes, or anything like that. It's a set amount of missions that will play out in a very particular way. And I'm not even saying that's a detriment to the game. It means they can expertly craft and experience in a story told through gameplay and cutscenes. This means the campaign also has this unifying quality to it. Each player who went through the campaign had the same experience, but maybe it hit them a bit differently, and you could talk about it with others. In fact, one of the moments that's still talked about to this day is Shepard betraying Roach and Ghost, taking Shepard out at the end with the throwing knife and so on. There's so much iconic imagery in the campaign, and these snapshots of moments from the story have stuck with us our whole lives. So why is that? As much as I love both MW2 and Black Ops 1, the way they tell stories actually could not be any more different. They take almost exact opposite approaches. Modern Warfare is about the spectacle and the adventure. It's meant to be the best interactive action movie you've ever experienced.
Brilliant, it's a great experience. It's an interactive action movie.
While there are elements of character, interpersonal connections, that's usually best done by the Black Ops series, meant to be more thoughtful, mind-bending, and a higher attention to plot detail. MW2, on the other hand, is the most visceral and over-the-top experience possible. That's a non-stop thrill ride that doesn't feel the need to get caught up in the finer details. I'm not saying one style is superior to the other, they're just different modes of storytelling, and I think both have their place. MW2 follows directly after COD 4, in which you eliminate Zakhaev, and in this story, instead of playing as Soap primarily, you jump all over the place playing as Private Allen, Gary Sanderson, or better known as Roach, and Ramirez depending on what the operation is. Generally, you'll flip back and forth between the Rangers or Task Force 141, so the story is attempting to hunt down a man named Makarov that must answer for his war crimes and other horrific actions. Basically a man that serves nobody but himself, which makes him pretty terrifying in its own right. The idea is to get behind enemy lines, understand Makarov's plan, and stop him. This plays out in the most controversial scene in the whole story. The shock value of this mission was needed in order to really make you hate Makarov and understand a bit into his methods. This mission is so effective at setting up the main villain and making the stakes high. And as much as I love this mission from a storytelling standpoint, the way it's set up, I have to say, always bothered me. It's just assumed that Private Allen somehow got behind enemy lines, got buddy-buddy with Makarov, and agreed to take place in this plan. Part of me always thinks it would have been kind of neat to see and play out where Private Allen attempts to get behind enemy lines and get on Makarov's good side. Maybe you can see them interact, and maybe you see Makarov get a little bit suspicious through some slip-ups in conversation or something. But Makarov doesn't show his hand until this mission. I don't know, but the more I think about it like that, I realize it's missing the point of MW2. This campaign isn't so worried about getting caught up in the details. Again, it's about the spectacle and the characters to some extent. Same issue with how Russia immediately invades the West. Wait, how'd that get there? After finding out one man involved in the incident was an American, there's no further investigation, even though clearly there were multiple people involved. I mean, hell, they even show the camera footage with all the other lads clearly in the shot. There were eyewitnesses and stuff, like with no questions asked, go all in on America as a result of one of the people being an American. In real life, there'd be weeks of politics, bureaucratic red tape, and so on, and even the invasion is blown through super fast.
Solar interference, heavy sunspot activity today.
Sierra Delta, we may have a minor ACS fault here. Do you have anything on your scope? Sierra Delta, repeat.
Wait, so the Russians hacked the comms so that they couldn't see their planes coming? How did they hack the comms? Nobody just have a pair of binoculars and a cell phone. The Russians anybody know where my blood pressure medicine is? Just everyone just dumb? Hey, stop talking. You're interrupting my review. But again, I fully understand it's missing the point. While yes, this is sloppy storytelling if you really want to investigate it, but this campaign is basically saying, hey, it doesn't really matter why they didn't investigate further. It doesn't matter how Russia so easily got onto US soil. Point is, World War III is here and it's on the homeland. Even though the events leading to it are borderline nonsensical, it's still a somewhat believable scenario otherwise. The main thing to focus on is the fact that war is happening here and now, and it's about the spectacle, the adventure, and the locations. So I can overlook some glaring storytelling and plot flaws in this case because it's clearly not the point. Again, those details are more for something like a Black Ops game. So Russia invades the West and it's all-out warfare. The goal of hunting Makarov begins with Shepard directing you towards Brazil to hunt down Rojas for intel on Makarov. I love how in these parts of the campaign, the militia you fight against is totally different to soldiers in other missions. The militia's tactics are sloppy and all over the place because they're untrained, but they really know the land, so they can catch you by surprise by hiding in weird corners or alleys or standing on rooftops. It's a neat little detail that I didn't quite appreciate fully until my revisit. You capture Rojas eventually, he gets interrogated by Ghost, and you move on to playing as Ramirez fighting directly on suburban ground. I always like this mission a lot. It's a recognizable and relatable locale. While again, the premise is borderline silly, defending and holding down the burger town and whatnot in Nate's restaurant, you imagine in your mind, yeah, this is probably what I envision an invasion would look like to some extent in this context. This mission is holding down and defending off locations from waves of Russian forces. As you progress and more exposition is given to you, you then slowly get to see, if you're paying enough attention, that Shepard seems to have no regard for the personal safety of his men or any remorse for those lost. While it's subtle, there are moments when you can tell Shepard's intentions maybe aren't so honest or clear. There's missions clearing neighborhoods to recover intel and take back the area. I love these ones as well. These were some of the more memorable missions from this campaign the first time I played them around as a kid too. Trying to locate VIP targets only to find out that they've already finished the job themselves. These missions always felt oddly realistic to me. You then go and invade an oil rig and infiltrate it from underwater. Infinity Ward made a big deal at the time of this underwater gameplay element, and it was certainly new given the time frame, but it was more of a visual than anything else because there's really no gameplay underwater at all. But that's fine, they were still very limited in what they could do with the engine currently. You invade and reclaim the oil rig, rescue hostages in a super heroic fashion, and in over-the-top sequences you eliminate all the bad guys from the area, and with zero wasted time, head immediately to the gulag to rescue a prisoner. There's quite literally no wasted time and no room for the story to breathe in between missions and events. That's both the biggest strength and weakness of this entire campaign. It's like an action movie that doesn't let up even for a second, but not necessarily in a bad way. It keeps you engaged the whole time, and there's virtually no dull moments. After securing the oil rig, you invade the gulag and make your way down to rescue an unspecified prisoner that Makarov is also targeting, so you must reach them first. This prisoner is hidden deep within the gulag, and after some real effort, you reach him to discover that it is indeed Captain Price. Soap and him have a nice moment, only to be undercut by having to escape. The escape itself is straight out of an action film, and I love this whole sequence. The gulag collapsing from the bombing run and just barely escaping. It's silly, obviously, but it perfectly captures the essence and spirit of the story. So you continue to cut back and forth between that situation and Ramirez defending the capital and so on. These sequences and the way they're paced do a great job of keeping the game interesting. Doing a stealth mission in the snow with Captain Price, then cutting back to Ramirez and the all-out war near the capital gives you a pretty well-illustrated view of how the entire world is reacting and responding to these events. So eventually a missile's launched from the silo and an EMP is set off.
ISS Houston, stand by. We may have a problem here. Houston, this is ISS.
You are a CIA operative, and
Right. Well,
This sends both the US and Russian forces into freefall momentarily. Meanwhile, Ghost and Roach invade the estate that is rumored to be the location of Makarov and his operations. You get unexpectedly ambushed, destroy a vehicle you thought contained Makarov but was actually a decoy, and breach and clear the house and download Makarov's plans and documents. Ghost and Roach doing the dirty work, in this case with Price and Soap on the other side of the world in the Boneyard, still communicating with you the whole time. You get the device and the intel, and as your escape is happening, Roach gets injured. Ghost risks his life to save you. General Shepard lands, and all is well. You're about to be saved when he takes the module from your hands and then eliminates both Roach and Ghost in one move of betrayal. This part was so well done. 11-year-old me never saw this coming, and I was genuinely hurt and upset. As soon as you get betrayed, you hear Price on the comms urgently warning you not to trust Shepard, but by that point, it's already too late. He gets the module, eliminates Ghost and Roach as just loose ends, and is preparing to paint himself as the hero and savior in the eyes of the public. Shepard intends to eliminate both Task Force 141 and Makarov's forces in one fell swoop. We then cut back to Soap and Price making their way through the Boneyard, eliminating anyone in your way, both Shepard's men and Makarov's alike. It's all-out warfare. Shepard is prepared to get away clean with this one unless you're able to stop him, so you invade the location of where he's reported to be, clear out his men along the way, ultimately leading to the final conclusion. Again, how did they get to Shepard and his location so easily? Why did nobody else question Shepard's motives at all throughout this entire situation? Doesn't really matter. It's about the adventure. The last mission in MW2 may be the most memorable moment in my entire gaming history. The way this lives rent-free in my head is amazing, even now. Everyone's all dazed and confused after the boat crash. You stumble your way to go and get an easy kill on Shepard and finish the job for good, only to find that he's still very capable of fighting, and he even bests you as you're knifed in the chest. But Price rescues you at the very last moment, risking himself to protect you. In a last effort, you dramatically remove the knife from your chest as Price and Shepard are battling it out, each completely down to their last wits. And for the most memorable main villain kill perhaps ever in the COD series, the satisfaction of this moment cannot be understated. Everything in this campaign was building up and it led to this very moment, and it's a stellar finale. Again, I can overlook a lot of the massive plot problems and details that would probably otherwise bother me, because put in the proper context, we care about the adventure that's happening and the characters involved to a real degree. Like I said, it's not the thoughtful depth of a Black Ops campaign, it's the best version of an over-the-top action movie with real stakes and emotion the whole way through, and combined with its amazing set locations is one of the most unforgettable COD campaigns ever made, and above all else is just plain fun. While yes, there are massive problems with some of its logic, to dwell on it too much would be missing the ultimate purpose. This is a self-aware game that knows just how over the top it is and plays up that element as much as possible very deliberately. It doesn't take itself too seriously and just wants to have fun, and it's very effective in that regard. MW2's campaign is still one of my favorites to play even now, and I'm sure is likely the case for a lot of you guys. Also, as a nice added bonus from Infinity Ward, they totally didn't have to do this, but after you beat the campaign, they added this museum mode in which you can load in and look at all these dioramas of the missions and scenes from the campaign. There's all the weapons that are at the game at your disposal as well, and in the remastered version, there's some beautiful concept art hanging all around the area, and of course, the most notable part of the museum, of course, pressing the big red button, makes all the scenes and dioramas come to life and attack you at once. Such a fun idea that nobody expected at the time, and I give huge props for creativity here. But MW2 didn't just get famous on grounds of its campaign alone. The multiplayer is what really catapulted this game into fame and stardom, so let's get into that. I don't know, is it fair to say that Modern Warfare 2's multiplayer is at least the most recognizable part of Call of Duty maybe ever produced? Like, a lot of people just will recognize this MP, maybe if they've not even played it that much themselves. It just seems like this is the most widely known in terms of, you know, the perception of the public. And I would say we all have great memories of this game's multiplayer, both for positive and negative reasons, but why exactly? During this game's prime, I wouldn't really have been able to explain in any real detail why the game was so addicting. All I knew was that I was hooked though. This game was practically a drug for us, and I was hooked like crack on it after my very first game. Now that I've gone back and played it again, as I've gotten a bit older and with a little bit more perspective, I think I've narrowed it down to a couple of key factors as to why this multiplayer is so addicting in terms of just core gameplay. First thing being the excellent map design. Most of the maps in MW2, but not all of them, are all pretty much expertly designed for exactly what this MP was going for. The maps in this game have this very distinct design philosophy. As opposed to most Treyarch maps, Treyarch tends to lean more towards maps that aren't exactly symmetrical, though they're more 3-lane style maps with every area of the map being relatively balanced and viable. They're a bit more just well-rounded across the board. Infinity Ward, on the other hand, usually makes very chaotic and super unstructured maps with clear power points. On most maps, there are spots that are just objectively very advantageous to be in, such as the top of the Rust Tower, or specifically the high-rise roof, which, side note, is literally like the biggest risk and skill check jump to even get it in the first place, and depending on what team you spawn in, you may have already easier access to it initially, which makes modes even like TDM have an objective, to hold and control power points. On top of maybe playing other objectives at the same time, like domination or demolition, it's a little more added depth to the core gameplay. Power points allowed keen players to take advantage of the map's layout more than the average player would, for better or for worse. The second is the way that weapons work. In more recent COD games, it seems almost any gun is viable on any map through attachment swapping to better suit the engagements of that. And that's fine, don't get me wrong, but in MW2, because you can only add one attachment to your gun, and two if you have the bling perk, you have to end up making huge sacrifices always, but it means certain guns and attachments may be more viable on other maps, leading to ultimately more gun variety. For example, maybe you realize you're playing Derailed and the AK build you're using has a little too much recoil at long range for, those longer range engagements you're probably going to find yourself in. So you have a dedicated ACR laser beam build made just for that. Or you'll run SMGs on Terminal or Invasion, but you wouldn't dare bring them ever into Wasteland and so on. But you get the point I'm making. Maybe this is me misremembering, but it felt like I used different guns depending on the map and mode I played. There was a fair amount of variety this brought, and same goes for the perk selection. Now, in all fairness, the perks in MW2, some of them are just downright corny. Last Stand, for example, makes you go down before dying, but there's no chance of reviving, so it's effectively there just to be annoying. I don't even have to go into one-man army noob-tube strategies and how utterly abused these could be. Stopping power as a perk 2 slot just literally gave you higher base damage, and there was almost no reason at all to run anything other than this perk. There was a radar jammer in the perk 3 slot, while on paper I can see why they thought this was a good idea, but it actually ends up being a disadvantage for the user because your enemies will be alerted to you when you're even close in proximity, and the more fuzzy their radar gets, the closer they are. So you're pretty much an even easier target for everyone. It wasn't really thought through all that well. Now, they did innovate on the original COD format in the form of upgradable pro perks, which gave them all an added bonus. This was pretty neat at the time, so while I have my major issues with the perks in this game, ultimately they're at least a big part of why this MP is remembered for, again, good or bad reasons. I give a lot of credit to the game's weapon attachments as well. Now, while it was still very primitive, very customizable attachments, and some iconic ones, of course, like the grenade launcher / noob tube, the baby monitor, aka the heartbeat sensor, and FMJ, basically giving you the ability to wall hack, tack knife for your pistols, plus Commando Pro, so you can make every 13-year-old that is apparently sleeping with your mother quit the game. These were all core to the identity of Modern Warfare 2, and let's not forget the most important component of this, the kill streaks. Again, strange to say now, given how used to we've gotten to having these in Call of Duty, but for the first time ever, we had the ability to customize what kill streaks we wanted to get, and these all had their place in the game. Well, most of them anyways. Inevitably, there were some streaks that just straight up weren't as good. For example, the care package was supposed to give you a random kill streaks, and every so often you could get something crazy from it, or you could usually just get ammo. Also, the airstrike sucks in this game. For 5 kills, you can get a one-time airstrike, or for just 2 more kills, you can get the Harrier that not only bombs just like the normal airstrike, but will stick around and farm tons of more kills as well. The AC-130 and Chopper Gunner are both rewarded at 11 kills, and personally, I think the AC-130 is more fun, but the Chopper Gunner is objectively much more effective. The Pavlo is awesome at 9 kills, and it's just like a really good presence in the game, but is basically a glorified Harrier. The EMP at 15 kills was always wild to come across in game. Emergency airdrops were always some of the most fun to me, because even though I knew what they were probably gonna be, it was like Christmas each and every single time that plane flew by and dropped 4 random kill streaks all over the map. It was pure dopamine, and not to mention the amount of, you know, the teams that would ravage to get to that spot to pick up all those kill streaks. It just made each match even more intense, but none, of course, were nearly as legendary as the tactical nuke. For 25 kills, you could literally end the entire game in a flash of light, and the crazy part was, in this game, you could use your kill streak earned kills to get more streaks. So as we all know, the best way to get a nuke was Harrier Strike into Chopper Gunner into nuke, and my god, the dopamine that would surge from your brain after getting your first tactical nuke was honestly top 10 most pleasurable human experiences of all time. Was this system broken? Absolutely. The ability to chain streaks into each other, and very commonly, someone getting a 7 kill streak could mean the end of the game potentially very quickly if you weren't careful. It's a double-edged sword because the kill streaks are simultaneously the best and worst part of MW2's multiplayer. It's so annoying and unbearable being on the receiving end, but it's heavenly when you're the one doing the stomping. I would also like to add, I think the satisfaction per kill is probably the best it's ever been in this game, and even going back and revisiting, I've said this before, I think it has mostly to do with the visual feedback and sound. The giant yellow, you know, plus 100 pop-up and the nice distinct hit marker sound is like ear and eye candy at every kill, and it never gets old. That, combined with how satisfying kill streaks were to get in this game, created this unbelievably addicting gameplay loop that was perfectly done. One of the more controversial elements of MW2's multiplayer was the inclusion of more death streaks. Now, in all fairness, I also hate most of these. Martyrdom is downright corny and is literally there just to troll. Final Stand is kind of cringe because it's just last stand, but after some time, if you didn't die, you could get back up and keep that life going. Not a huge fan, honestly, and although death streaks, I have to say, like Copycat, were kind of cool. This was so if somebody was dunking on you in game and you're just jawing to yourself about the only reason they're doing good is because their class setup or, you know, attachments or whatever, Copycat allowed you to use their exact loadout, perks and all, so you can really see who's the better player. That one was fun and not too annoying, and you could tell if somebody had copied your classes, you'd get a notification for it too. Juiced is alright as well, I guess, and most of the time it didn't even last long enough before your next gunfight would happen anyway, so it didn't end up being much of a factor at all. Some of the equipment was rather interesting, so as far as lethals go, almost everything was viable. You know, regular frag grenades, Semtex, Claymore, and even C4 were all very useful in their own ways. Tacticals, on the other hand, stuns and flashes are going to be the most common, but less commonly used were tactical insertions, which manually set your next respawn point. This could very easily be abused, but Blast Shield is one of my personal favorite. Not to use, though, only on account of it literally making it so you can't see. Your visual field is almost nothing, and it wipes out your entire minimap, which is kind of hilarious as well. When MW2 multiplayer is up for discussion, it's often claimed that nearly everything in the game was overpowered or otherwise had a broken element in some way, and that's not exactly wrong. Everything is just crazier compared to COD 4. In this game, for some reason, you can dual-wield UMPs. You can dual-wield shotguns as a secondary, which was my personal go-to. Virtually everything in this game was excellent at something. Maybe close-range combat, high precision over long distance, or being able to take multiple targets at once, and so on. Almost everything was somewhat viable in the right context, and due to the variety of maps and modes, you'd see this variety in the weapons really shine. MW2, in terms of just sheer core gameplay, while is still very flawed, yes, is still one of the most addicting experiences ever conceived in gaming. But outside of just core gameplay for a moment, the progression system through prestiging was more advanced this time compared to its predecessors. The emblem and calling card system was expanded and really showed the culture of Infinity Ward and more generally the world very well at the time, and they're pretty creative. The camos also weren't anything too crazy by today's standards. You know, the fall camo would probably be considered very bland now, but compared to the rest of the available camos, this and Red Tiger were by far the sauciest ones, and MW2 really took the ideas of COD 4 and just deepened them and introduced new ideas on its own that even have a ripple effect from those choices that are felt in Call of Duty multiplayer even now. This game also had some of the best voice acting for lines and factions ever produced.
We've been EMP'd! All electronics are out! We lost that round, but it's not over yet. Get ready for the next one. Good job, team. Get ready for the next round. Enemy AC-130 above! Enemy airdrop incoming.
It's so over the top and dramatic, but like I said, that's the spirit and essence of this game. Every gunfight was like a life and death battle. Hell, even getting damaged in this game, your screen will literally get so red, you feel like you're going to die in real life. It's so exaggerated that I just can't help but love it. I think what we're sorely missing in newer Call of Duty games is what MW2 did so well was intensity. It's hard to even put into words just how intense everything felt with this game. And of course, MW2 lobby trash talk was something else. I always thought the trash talk was funnier in these older games because everyone's mics were such bad quality, it added this comedy value. Now everyone has HD sounding mics, and that comedy element is lost a little bit to me. There are some great design choices like giving launchers the ability to destroy UAVs this time and counter other kill streaks that are more airborne, which again weren't as viable before. Some real creativity and a skill gap existed in this game, giving it instant likability. And I won't soon forget how MW2 made me feel all those years ago, and more objectively even now, recognizing all the innovation at the time, the genius that was the overall map design, and practically perfecting the previously established core Modern Warfare experience that was focused on pure fun. Infinity Ward truly captured lightning in a bottle with this game, and with MW2's multiplayer, I've come to the realization that it's truly more than just nostalgia that makes this game great. While again, like the campaign, even though there are glaring flaws to that experience, as a whole package, this created some unforgettable moments on account of it being an innovative and well-designed game for what it was.
Activision had me come up to a suite about a month and a half ago, and I got to play the game. But I don't own it yet, so I'm here tonight to pick up my copy, and I'll be online with everybody else tonight.
You've played, and I've played it solidly for 26 days, which is a terrifying admission, and I'm very close to divorce with my wife.
Multiplayer was far and away the most famous aspect to this game, but it did ship with a real third mode for the first time ever in a Modern Warfare title, and that of course was Spec Ops. Finally, the third main pillar in the MW2 game offering was a clever little co-op mode called Spec Ops. In this, you start out with a basic set of alpha missions in which you have a different objective of gameplay to achieve. These can range from stealth missions to endurance to speedrunning and so on. Tons of variety within the actual gameplay, surprisingly, even considering the fact that for the most part, these are made up from scraps from the campaign, and in some cases are literally campaign missions, but in reverse. Mostly the maps and whatnot are taken straight from the single player or unused maps that they probably prototyped with some slight alterations to its objectives. Now, these can be done solo for sure, but for most of them at least, these are specifically designed for co-op and the two-man buddy system style of gameplay. Originally only having access to the alpha missions, you can do them at various difficulties or speed to earn more stars ranging from 1 to 3. The more stars you earn, the more you unlock through the rest of the Bravo, then Charlie, then Delta missions, and so on. These get progressively harder as well, even if you're playing on the 1-star difficulty as you go through. While in general, I really like the gameplay loop of all of these Spec Ops missions and co-op, it's absolutely going to give you a solid few hours, if not more, of playtime, but admittedly, it's nowhere near as depthful or as replayable as Treyarch Zombies mode. And I hate to even say that because I don't even think they're a really good comparison to one another. They serve totally different functions, but I had to at least acknowledge it. Not to mention the fact that Zombies can be enjoyed, a lot solo or co-op, but Spec Ops to me is way more fun co-op compared to solo. It's a fairly drastic difference in my opinion, and it doesn't really bother me that most of the Spec Ops missions are not new assets at all. It's just a blend of campaign stuff or otherwise unused things, but it's also quite literally how Treyarch made Zombies in the beginning as well. It's just a, clever way to reuse things they've already developed to make a new set of gameplay experiences. To be honest, I don't have much else to say about Spec Ops as a mode. I always had a lot of fun playing with a buddy and attempting to get 3 stars on every mission, and it kept us busy for a while. And as a first iteration and draft of this mode that we would see in future titles, I would say this is a very solid way to start it out. But outside of that, to be honest, I don't think there's much else to say about Spec Ops, as it's pretty self-explanatory. I like the mode a lot, and it's a very nice fit for this game. I believe in the future, if they wanted to do more Spec Ops style missions, a way to make it have more depth is to develop, actual unique locations and assets for it that don't appear anywhere else, just to give it a little bit more identity and flavor and make it feel truly distinct from the rest of the game. Because as far as MW2, it doesn't really feel detached from the rest of the game, or not distinct enough. You can tell it's a blending of everything else that's already there. But other than that, I really do like Spec Ops as a mode, and I think it's great. With all of that in mind, Modern Warfare 2 was so much more than just a game. This, while for many of us practically helped us grow up and discover passions, it was this game when I realized I loved video games, and without it, I don't think there's any way I would have become a YouTuber at all. This game was a real shockwave into culture at the time and began to pave the way for gaming and gamers more generally to be accepted within the mainstream. This game helped us all become the people we are today, and after investigating more, I truly believe MW2 was a genuinely great game that innovated immensely compared to what was standard at the time. Vince Zampella, Jason West, and Robert Bowling all put their heart and soul into this game, and it clearly shows. And I know this video will probably make some of you feel sad, maybe it's bittersweet or something, but I think it's better to come to the appreciation and smile about the fact that you were around to experience this special time. It's so easy to be sad about, the fact that those days are gone, but the fact that they happened at all, to me, is worth far more. Maybe you spent your days playing MW2 bonding with a parent or something, and you'll cherish those memories forever. And maybe all these years later, with Modern Warfare 2 coming out again, maybe look at it as an opportunity to create new memories with your own kids now if you've got them, or a best friend, or anyone that's important to you. MW2 brought us all together so well, so maybe we should pick up the torch one more time and create some beautiful memories.